Our culture today will tell you that suffering is something that you should avoid, and that if you're in anguish or despair, that you're in the wrong place and you need to go somewhere else. And it's difficult because we don't really know what to do with suffering in our culture nowadays. We blame other people for it, and we try to avoid it at all costs. We think that if we're in some place of suffering, that we're in the wrong place. And I want to talk a little bit about that, and if you're in a place of suffering or anguish, how that could mean that you're in the right place. A lot of the difficulty is when we see other people suffering, think of like a loved one or family member, we don't want them to be in that state or place, right? We want to solve their ailment and find joy. And there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. I think there's great beauty in caring for someone who's in a suffering state and helping them. You think of someone who's having an illness, for example. But the weird reality is, and this is where it gets hard, is when there is immense suffering or anguish, there's so much growth that happens at that time. You can think of when you work out at the gym, right? You basically put your body in a state of suffering so that it will grow stronger. And there's like scriptures that talk about this, how our trials are producing character, hope, perseverance, these things. It's hard for us to comprehend that. I don't like those passages in scripture because I can't wrap my mind around how the suffering that I'm going through, how the things that don't make sense that I want to run from and avoid, how those can really be good things. And there's always small areas in life where you see that's true, though. Like another example is I've been starting seedlings this spring to start in the garden, and this is my first time doing it indoors like this. I've accidentally overwatered them too much the past couple weeks, and they haven't grown at all. And so there's this weird thing where if the seeds have too much water, they have too much abundance, then their roots aren't going to grow out and go search for water and help the plant become strong. And right now they're kind of stunted in their growth. These seedlings aren't growing, and it's because I'm coddling them too much, per se. I'm not helping them acclimate to a difficult environment and nurture them in that way. And so there's a lot of lessons with suffering. With Jordan Peterson, for example, he'll say, the responsibility is what helps drive meaning. And I think that's true to a certain extent, but I don't think that's fully true because, there's a lot of suffering that people go through that it seems really vain. Like people wake up super early to go to jobs that they don't necessarily like. And there's a lot of meaningless suffering in that because you don't see any sense of purpose or like long-term meaning in doing what you're doing that's causing the suffering. So I don't know if having it tied to responsibility necessarily equates to meaning. I think there can be meaning found in responsibility, but I don't think it's an equal, So I was trying to think about that, and I was reading Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling, where he talks about Abraham and Isaac, and he has a section in there where he's talking about what's the difference between Abraham murdering Isaac and Abraham sacrificing him, in the biblical sense. And he's talking about the difficulty in understanding the difference there. And he says that there's an anguish in trying to comprehend that difference. And I think the word anguish is a really good description for suffering that does invoke a sense of meaning. Because, like I was trying to say, there is suffering that we go through that seems pretty vain and meaningless because there isn't really meaning behind it. And I think those are just pains in our everyday world, right? Sinful, broken world. And there's going to be suffering that just comes from being in the world, and I think those are things from it. Or maybe we're being sinned against, for example, suffering coming from that. But when we have anguish, there's a sense of, there's like this raw sense of, and it's a slight difference in the wording, right? But there's a raw sense when you think of anguish of like terror or like really, I don't know, just like it's super deep agony in a sense. Maybe agony is the right word. There's a super deep agony, and when someone has that, it's because there is immense meaning to what's going on. You know, like we had a miscarriage recently, and there was a lot of anguish with that, right? And it's because there's so much meaning behind these two. We had twins that we miscarried, and I still don't know if I should use we or my wife, but yeah, there's immense agony there because there's so much meaning to those two lives that could have been here in the present, you know, and now they're gone, and there's a lot of mourning with that. And I think some of the agony is, you know, that's tied to being parents, and especially for my wife being a mom, there's tons of hurt there because it's tied to something so meaningful. And you know, she was like wrestling with, did she do anything wrong, and all those kinds of things, because there's a lot of meaning there. And those aren't things that you think about when you're just going through some mundane suffering. And so all that to say, I think if you can analyze your situation, and if you do have anguish in it, then man, that means you're going through something that's really gonna grow you a ton. And so the kind of message, I guess, with this is really to embrace that anguish and that pain. You know, like it will help you tremendously. And just with me personally, I've had a work situation this past year, and I've been trying to find the meaning in it. And there's a lot of mundane suffering that's been going on where it hasn't felt meaningful or purposeful. But also when I was able to sit down and have more of a vision of where I wanted to go, it helped give more of an anguish to it, because it's like I'm striving through the suffering, I'm striving through the difficulty to go somewhere else, and so that has more meaning rather than just kind of sitting there and getting pummeled by my situation. And so there's a mental shift that needs to happen there, and there's some comprehension that needs to happen. But it's really hard, and I'm not saying that this is a perfect answer. This has just kind of been my thoughts going through something that's been, or multiple things that have been difficult recently. But yeah, the biggest thing is we can't shy away from those experiences. We need to embrace them, and I think that's the only answer for like things in life that we don't have solid answers for, is just to embrace them wholeheartedly, and yeah, embrace that practice, if that makes sense. I had a mentor once who said to embrace awkward, because awkward is this weird feeling that you don't know what to do with, right? People like shy away. But if you press in and embrace it, you're like, all right, this is going to be an awkward situation, then a lot of times something pretty good comes out of it, because you bring this enthusiasm to it. It's kind of life-giving. And I think that's kind of similar with the suffering and anguish situation. If you can embrace it and just like kind of embody it more, I think that helps get you through it. So not sure where you're at today. Those are some different thoughts, but if you're going through a season or time of suffering, I hope you can find some meaning in it. And if you are having a hard time doing that, that's a part of that's a part of suffering as a whole. Is there are times we're going to suffer and there's no meaning in it, and that just added suffering, unfortunately. But if you're blessed enough to be able to really have anguish and be wrestling with something, then man, that's a good sign, and that's a sign of growth. Jordan Peterson also says, this is something that rings in my ear a lot, is that if you see something that's a problem, like it's your problem per se, like if there's some kind of wrestling that you're doing with something, then that's a sign that it's your problem per se. Yeah, so like for me, I'm trying to figure out this life balance thing, getting up at 4 a.m. in the middle of December, flying to work, going 100 miles an hour in the winter when things need to slow down more. I just ask questions like, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And is there a way to do it differently? And that just kind of seems like my problem. And there's a lot of anguish and suffering that I get from that, because I'm trying to understand all these different things, and I'm trying to carve my journey. And that's a lot of what this channel is. I'm trying to carve that path forward for people and trailblaze that, don't feel like they fit into this suburban life or city life or wherever really they're at, and just get some balance back in their life and find that meaning and purpose again, and not go a million miles an hour all the time. That's just I just get so much anguish over that. And if you can find that, or if you recognize that, then that's a good sign. Don't shy away from that. But it's going to be tremendously hard. And yeah, I'm here with you in that. So a little bit of rambling, but if you're going through a season of suffering, let me know below what you're going through. Would love to hear you on that and just listen to the difficulties there. But yeah, if you're interested in subscribing this channel, following, I'm on an adventure to discover a balanced and authentic life, and I'm sharing insights I learn along the way, like this, as well as documenting it and my journey forward. So hope this helps you today. Love to hear in the comments below where you're at. Take care.